All right, welcome back. This is the Something Venture podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. This is part 2 of my conversation with Mike Stutz. Mike Stutz is a reality TV producer in Los Angeles. Where else? And he talks here, you know, we're kind of in the waning, I think, of talking about how Donald Trump got elected. But being a reality star product, Donald Trump, that is, I thought it would be fun to talk to a actual reality television producer about what that might mean. So it's a fun conversation. It's Mike Stutz. I'm Kent Lindstrom. I'm your host. This is Something Venture. So that's been my immense frustration. Is sort of that.
Yes, I would say that the media probably, and this is well covered ground, so I'm not breaking anything. But there's a bad movie with a good speech in it, Bicentennial Man, a Robin Williams movie, which is not a good movie by any stretch. But there is a speech in it where one of his political advisors talks about it was the day that you put two screens, you know, talking heads and two screens side by side on television, and one person was speaking facts and the other was sort of speaking blather and nonsense. But those boxes are the same size, and those boxes are giving credibility. It's almost like you should. The less facts you're saying, the smaller your box should be on television. So you should have one 4/5 of the screen is one person, and then like this tiny little box in the corner. And every time you make an inaccurate statement, your box gets a little smaller until you disappear from the screen. Perhaps that's the way it should be done. But the media put those boxes side by side and said, yes, what Kellyanne Conway is saying is the same as what the Democratic representative is saying. Whoever that have, Karen Finney, a friend of mine, was one of them. But that I don't know how they were surprised by it. They didn't know quite how to deal with it, but they gave way too much credence to something like the email scandal. I think This American Life did a whole hour on exactly breaking down what that email scandal was and what having a private server was. Like, businesses have private servers, and I'm not going to... This is where people tune out en masse, and this has been covered and all that. But I do think that there was a lot of coverage dedicated to a kind of a non-issue, and that just equally weighed.
Right.
And Trump's no fool. Well, he is a fool, but he's no dummy, I'm sure. And that he knew that if you've got just 1,000 crazy issues out there, nobody can quite pick or choose one. Like, if he had had one scandal, that would have been the thing, and the two boxes side by side would have been the emails versus, pick it. Which one do you want? Pussygate. I don't get to say that enough. But, that people just said, okay, well, let's just cover them equally. And I do fault them for that. Now, whether that makes a difference because half the country is going to believe one thing, half is going to believe the other, I don't know. But in such a tight election, and it was a tight election, I think that they need to figure out a better way to cover that. But I agree, people don't care. And in the same way, to bring it back to more my area of expertise, with reality television, they don't care. They know it's fake, but you can. I once worked with a guy on the autistic spectrum, who was. We were in a cave. We were like doing one of those cave tours on a boat, and he was a very high functioning guy. Did pretty well, but he got very, very scared when they kept talking about like, oh, down this one cave, like there's demons and there's watch out, don't get him riled up, and he got very, very scared. And afterwards, I asked him, were you afraid of the demons? And he said, no, I know that demons don't exist, but I don't want them to get me. It was this, I can hold both of these thoughts to be true side by side. So I know that reality television's fake, and yet I accept it as real. Is a cognitive dissonance? I don't know. And that sort of went on with this, is that I know Trump's lying, but I also believe he is telling the truth. I'm just going to accept whatever he says, even though part of me has to know this is ridiculous. Because he's on my team. I'm wearing those team colors. I've got the banner. So I have booked my ticket. I'm on his side. It doesn't matter.
It seems to me that that's the lesson that, if you wanted him not to win, the lesson that people weren't getting was, look, for whatever reason, they don't care. And you're getting more and more outraged and piling up more and more. That's why if they had 5 more clips, I still think his supporters would be like, I got it. He's that guy.
But I guess what's the answer then? Like, if a supporter just insists that I will support him if he shoots someone, as he said, if he walks down Fifth Avenue and shoots someone, and you're still on his side, which I think a lot of people would have been. What is the answer to that? How would you battle that? Because you can't just say, well, let's talk facts here.
I would. So what I think should have happened.
Okay, that's what this is really about. I'm just like some sort of conduit. This is like my wolves in Washington. You just needed a way to get to this.
That was way too much setup.
Yeah, I know, man. Well, you'll just cut all the rest of it out, and we'll just start with this.
Exactly. At some point, just concede the Trump people are voting for that. The people to work on weren't like try to persuade the Trump people to change, but to take the I'm fed up, the Bernie or bust, like that set of people, and just say, hey, your goal, and get them engaged, get them to stop fucking around. Basically.
But how? I mean, this comes down to, we talked about a little bit last night about a unnamed friend of ours, mine, who is a very smart person. Who is a well-informed person, not an easily duped person, who somewhat took seriously the idea that Hillary Clinton had body doubles and that she was gravely ill, and and he was like, well, it's sort of he sort of had that cognitive dissonance of, it's sort of crazy, but it kind of makes sense type thing. And I don't know how to have that discussion. I don't know how to get around that. And he would have been a great example. I have no idea whether he voted. I don't know. I allegedly he kind of came around, but I didn't press it too hard because I maybe didn't want to know the answer. But so you're talking about that guy and getting him involved. But how am I doing that if we're going to believe that Hillary has body doubles and she's gravely ill?
I guess I'm thinking more of that guy's a lost cause, but. I guess
he shouldn't be. This is a allegedly liberal, well-educated guy. It doesn't. I mean, he's in California, so it doesn't matter as much right now because there's a big. Your state's going to go one way. But there's a lot of him in Wisconsin and Michigan and Ohio.
Yeah.
The Bernie Bros aren't just all idiots. They have chosen to believe some things that are fact light, and how do you reverse them? It's not. They're not. Locked in a tiny, home in southern Louisiana, and they're only getting word from Fox News. They are, and I don't mean to blaspheme some. I'm not saying that person can't be a very smart person too. And I think that is a thing we need to stop doing. Is just anyone who voted for Trump is an idiot. Is a pretty big blanket.
Well, because they won too. So
how
smart are you?
Laughing all the way to the bank, but yeah.
I guess my theory, and it's probably not right, but is that the Brexit thing, where there's a series of people who are like, oh, I voted for Brexit, but because I thought it wouldn't win, I was trying to send a message.
Right.
So people who are trying,
I don't know what that message is, but yeah.
Well, anybody who's trying to send some message to somebody didn't want Donald Trump to win, but didn't think he would, so therefore they wrote in John Oliver or Barack Obama 3 times or whatever. That set of people seems to me the set of people that if they actually thought Donald Trump could win might be the most persuadable. Whereas persuading a Trump supporter to not, because at some point they're probably like, I don't want to talk to you about it. I know you think I'm an idiot and he did this and this and this. I don't want to hear the 10th thing. They were probably tuned out. I guess my thesis is that if people are like, it's a close one, man, it could be Donald Trump, or if the polls were reporting that Donald Trump was ahead, a lot more people would have been like, yeah, I'm not writing in John Oliver. I'm voting for Hillary. This is serious now.
Yeah.
But, maybe that's my, the retro fantasy seems to be, if only people knew the truth, man, it was all that fake news, then they would, have voted for Hillary. Mine is, if people had just known that the odds were higher, they would have. But it's all kind of...
Yeah, but people did statistical. It's not like Nate Silver was just making stuff. Although some people accused him of that, but most people are going to 538 and looking at the polls and stuff. Well, also the thing is a lack of understanding of statistics, and this is an area obviously not my specialty.
No, but
just because there's a 1 in 4 chance,
obviously nobody's specialty this year. Yeah,
just because there's a 1 in 4 chance is not a 0 in 4 chance. That means there is a 1 in 4 chance, and I think Nate Silver himself kind of said that at some point. He's like, yeah. It's a 2/3 chance Hillary's going to win, but that means there's a third chance that she's not going to win.
He even said it a few times, think about someone kicking a 45-yard field goal in football.
Right.
Or you flip a coin twice and it comes up heads twice in a row.
Right.
You say it's going to come heads twice in a row and it does. Probably not going to happen. But it's not like, holy crap, what the hell just...
Right.
What? And everyone carried on as if Jill Stein had won. Like, that's the shock level of Jill Stein winning that people seem to apply to Trump. Like, I can't believe it. It's like, you're confusing how bad you think it is, how bad maybe it is,
Right.
with the probability. And, like, those bad things happen. Like, really, really bad things happen. Like, people die of really bad things.
Right.
And you're really confusing, like, too.
Well, yes, people go through. There's a lot of magical thinking out there on a whole lot of things, but yeah, I mean, we also aren't, for better or worse, probably worse. We aren't a parliamentary system. I absolutely understand the idea that a third party or multiple parties need to exist. But our political system doesn't work very well that way. We aren't designed to have multiple parties with percentages in our parliament.
Right.
And I think that sometimes that's not discussed enough. Like, it is a problem because it doesn't allow. It does. You just end up with lowest common denominator, and that doesn't mean that Trump and Hillary are the same. But it does mean that, well, yes, the Democrats probably would have been better served to think about. This is someone with a lot of baggage. Do we have some other viable options? Should we at least have a more real discussion about that rather than sort of letting her cruise to the coronation? But friends who are very into third parties, which I support. I mean, I way back in the day, I did not vote for Nader. But I did give him money, and I did, like, back in 2000, there were things he was saying that I thought were valid and needed to be heard in an election of, Gore versus Bush.
Right.
As it turns out, Nader, like, throws Florida and, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So it's weird. You can't have, I understand the frustration of saying, I don't want Hillary Clinton. I want whatever. I want a libertarian party. We could have a whole show on libertarians and the fascinating facts there. But I get it. But it isn't designed that way, and it is going to be screwed. Both of you can be right. That discussion needs to be had.
Yeah.
And if you vote that third party, you're going to consistently screw. I mean. And Clinton, Bill Clinton in '92 was helped by Ross Perot.
Right.
That the third party again siphoned off votes from probably helping Bill Clinton win.
Yeah.
So again, like now, a story. Your friends who are political scientists are like, oh, what are these guys talking about? They have no idea what they're talking about. But yeah, this has just become like a barroom conversation that is being had all across.
You've just described all podcasts.
California,
That's
Oregon, Washington, New York. Yeah. But I perhaps the discussion needs to be had about our form of government. But I can't imagine. I mean, it'll be fascinating to see, and by fascinating I mean terrifying, to see what is coming. And maybe I'll look nostalgically back on this podcast when it's so much worse than we think it could be, and it could be really bad.
The third Trumpian dynasty.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably don't want to overlearn the lesson either. Like, it wasn't a landslide where you clearly missed something and Donald Trump won like 70-30. It was, a tie. And, and then 80,000 votes went one way. So it's not one of the ones where you're like, man, we just don't understand the whole world. It's like, damn, it didn't have to happen.
Right, it didn't go that way, and that's fine. Although I do think that if it were reversed, I don't think I'm being alarmist when I say if it came out that the Russians were heavily influencing to get Hillary Clinton elected, I think there would have been riots in the streets from the right, and there would have been some sort of crazy elector thing would happen. And I don't think that the Democrats, and I'm glad about this, have that in them to burn stuff down and to threaten, to go the Florida route of just bang on the doors and, But the problem is we work in a system where one side is willing to do whatever it takes, like absolutely whatever it takes so they can have the best chance of winning, and the other side is sort of having a civilized, I think it's Annie Hall, or I believe it's Annie Hall. Could be Manhattan. Not sure. But when Woody Allen's talking about the Nazis marching, and he's I hear the Nazis are marching out New Jersey. We should go out there with some bricks and some bats, and someone says, oh, no, I read the most scathing op-ed piece, in the New York Times the other day. It's like Nazis, they really understand bricks and bats, and then there is something to that. That yes, those scathing pieces, the John Oliver comedy, all those things influence some people who already are, they are in the choir, they are leading the choir, and I don't know. Does that mean you become less civilized? Does that mean that the left, or whatever we call the left, needs to pick up bricks and bats and start breaking things too? I have no idea.
Well, and there's the more generous version of that is those are two philosophical points of view, which is that the Democrats believe in the government and those institutions, and the Republicans kind of think those institutions are just in the way, so they're more likely to be okay with ripping down like an EPA or whatever it might be
until their water gets poisoned or whatever.
It's a really I've never understood. If you're super rich, it seems like the main thing you want is you don't want everyone else to like revolt and take your money.
Yeah, so that's Teddy Roosevelt. In the beginning of the 20th century, Teddy Roosevelt, this is where my History Channel comes in handy, but Teddy Roosevelt says to his fellow rich people in a very practical way, look, the socialists are getting a big percentage of votes. This is not the fringy party anymore. So we need to pick it up. We need to find a way to make sure that people are at least getting some of what they want, or they're going to start burning our houses down. Yeah. And that is something that needs to be. But I don't know. But now that's kind of a reverse threat. They're like, you need to shut up, liberals, or we're going to burn your houses down. Yeah. Like we'll show you.
Right. But not being a rich person though, that does seem like a pretty smart idea. Like, look, don't take everything. Like, don't take every tax break and everything to the point. Like, we got it pretty good. Like, let's keep it on the low down. Like, don't rub people's noses in it because the whole system might get flipped over.
I'm not sure there's like that coherent a thought process going on, but maybe privatizing government, the libertarian privatize everything. We have an example of that. Madison did that. The War of 1812. He wanted to privatize the military and do all those things. We almost lost that war because we were woefully unprepared for the Brits as they came back for us. And he himself, Jefferson and Madison are great examples of small government. Oh my God, like Louisiana's available, buy it. Oh my God, the Brits are attacking. Big government. Practicality tends to reverse idealism sometimes.
Yeah, well, Jefferson was like. Had that same thing where he was like, government shouldn't be in control of anything till he was the guy. Then he's like, government needs to control everything, man. This is ridiculous. So
this is like our really dumb version of Hamilton. We're just like, you know who's dumb? George Washington, that guy. I can just do George Washington trivia. That was probably my favorite thing I learned in my History Channel thing was I got a lot of George Washington trivia, but maybe that's another podcast.
Yeah, take that, Lin-Manuel. You've got a mixtape. We got a podcast.
Yeah, he was my one George Washington trivia that I always enjoy.
Yes.
For the one person left listening at this point, is that his teeth were not wooden teeth. They were a mixture of like slave teeth and
wooden teeth. Fake news.
Yeah, fake news. But they had a spring in the back, and so if he opened his mouth too wide or if he talked too long, they would fly out of his mouth. And so that's why all of his speeches were incredibly short, because he didn't want his teeth to fly out of his mouth.
That is fabulous. Yeah, wasn't the entire Gettysburg Address like... It wasn't very. If I'm saying this number, someone can fact check it, but it was like 8 minutes or 10. It wasn't like an hour.
Yeah, well,
even like
quality beats quantity sometimes.
Even Barack Obama, who you can listen to forever, like he's got he does a good hour at the inauguration or whatever.
Sure, he's got some good writers.
Those are the days.
He's got some good material. But yeah.
Well, so what's next? It's the. So now Donald Trump's the president. I feel like the lesson has not.
Oh God, get off Trump! Oh no,
about to be. I still feel like the lesson hasn't really been learned. Like all my liberal friends are like, "Oh my God, he did this! Oh my God, he did this!" It's like you understand that's all one thing.
Correct.
Like him getting elected was bad.
Right. You have cancers, therefore all of these things in your body are failing.
Yes. So of course he didn't pick like an environmentalist to run the EPA, and of course he didn't bring back Hillary Clinton to be Secretary of State. Like that was the whole thing. Like back when it was like we shouldn't let this guy get elected. Right. It's because of course he's going to keep his businesses like, and you're going back to being outraged about every little thing. But remember how that worked last time was like not at all. So it seems like there needs to be some new like. Well, first of all, you got to wait for him to do something. Like, what are you going to get mad about? You got to pick one thing, and are we going to be deporting people? Are we going to be like the environment? Like, because right now it feels like every bad thing in the world's about to happen, and.
Well, I mean, this will be an interesting podcast perhaps to listen to a year from now, that it's the least evergreen in the world in some ways because it's all a lot of speculation now, and who knows, what kind of surprises await. I think the indications so far. Now, granted, he is not in office yet. Well, maybe he is. I don't know when you're listening to this, but the indications are that he is willing to make some pretty crazy decisions, and I'm hoping that maybe when he's actually in office, that some of those decisions aren't as crazy. That these are, just lighten up the fireworks to see who's, what's going to happen. That's not a metaphor at all, by the way. Lighten up the fireworks. What does that mean? Please put that in the cold open. But I think it could be. Yes, a terrifying series of events, because it is, again, not saying anything that many others haven't said, but a lot of democracy is based on civility, that there are a lot of unwritten rules. Well, we just do it this way because we all want to get along. We have a social contract with each other, and he's tearing up that social contract. He says, I don't care. Right. Or in Congress, too, okay, well, we're not appointing a Supreme Court justice for a year because, we just kind of made it up. And there are more unwritten things than written things that keep our democracy healthy. And if you choose not to go by any of those, and you can say you're shaking things up, but it is very easy to destroy a democracy, and or to destroy a government that's kind of working. You look at Venezuela now, and I'm not going to wade into that at all. The history of Venezuela is not my strong point, surprisingly. Right. But you look at a country at least that had all of its basic services and had, people had food and medicine and all those things not that long ago. Right. And now it is in absolute dire straits where people are starving and unable to get even the most basic medical care. Governments are based on everybody sort of pitching in and participating in what's going on some level. I will go to work. I will pay some tax. I will do these things. And if people decide not to do that, there is I think the scariest thing out there for people. There is, I guess for those who are into the Lord, please forgive me, but there is no one ultimately in charge. We have this it's like money. I'm not the first one or the thousandth one to say this, but money only has value if we all believe it has value. It is not really worth anything. It's just some construct that we've created to have, a functioning society. So government's the same way. We've got this construct. It's set up this way, but these rules don't have to apply. There is no magic, okay, but seriously, who's the referee? There is no referee. Yeah. And I think people often are surprised throughout history when those things come down. When the Germans roll into Poland, they're like, but we made an agreement. But we had we're not doing that now. We already had World War I. It is a very, very fragile setup, and most of history has been brutal, ugly, mean, including most of American history. And I know I'm not one of those people who shits on everything that is American history. With a lot of good things that happen, but
it's pretty violent.
It is a country based on stolen land and slavery. Yeah, and it's brutal. And I guess it seemed kind of like we were getting into a more enlightened approach, but it doesn't have to be that way. I don't believe that enlightened is the de facto end. It's just a possibility. Yeah. And we could go a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a one of these courses that I listen to on tape.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that.
On tape?
So like Scotch tape?
No, that I listen to on the podcast. There's a professor who kind of says, as he talks about different things that have worked in history for governing people, where he says something like, democracy is not the perfect form of government for all peoples at all times in history.
Yes.
Which is kind of like, we just decided democracy is super cool, and I still think it is, but it doesn't have to be a democracy. Like, the military could decide that they like Trump, or I don't think that would happen.
There was a very weird setup. There's a lot of them, but in the 80s when Oliver North was on trial, or I guess he was testifying to Congress, and I remember there was at one point, and maybe this is false memory in our post-truth world, but they were asking him about contingencies for the military takeover of the government if X, Y, and Z happen, and he sort of started going down that trail about, oh yeah, we have a contingency, the military takes over if, and it was kind of ixnay, and it was sort of in the headlines for a day or two, and then just went away, and because people don't want to talk about that possibility. But that is one of the few lessons I remember from history of Brazil at UCLA, my fine alma mater. It was a great class, but I just don't remember a ton of it. But it was, the professor was talking about when you build up a large military, the military rarely goes away. That it rarely just stands down and walks away.
Our job is done
See
here.
Iraq, you know. A military, the more you build it up, the more they need something to do. And if you don't give them something to do, they look back at the country and say, like, maybe we could run this thing. And I think that Americans are led to believe, well, maybe not the ones who are hoarding guns and ready for the government to come after them in white helmets and blue helicopters. Is that right? UN.
I thought that they're black helicopters.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I got to get all my different theories together here. But I mean, we think, that it couldn't happen here. I know that's Sinclair Lewis, but that couldn't possibly happen here. But why couldn't it happen here? Yes, of course it could.
Yeah.
And it has happened throughout history. And I truly hope it doesn't. I hope that I'm not like listening to this recording like in a small cell somewhere as someone's like, did you or did you not say this? Did you say Trump is a dummy?
Yeah, are you not Michael Stutz from the podcast recorded on this date?
I am not, by the way. That is not me. That is a different guy. That's the artist, Michael Stutz. I am the artist from San Diego. I make a lot of visual sculptures, and they're great. And these are my opinions, not the TV producer.
At the dawn of the first Trumpian dynasty, were you not recording a seditious podcast?
You were like laughing, laughing now, and the tears come later.
By the way, I did watch one of those on YouTube. One of the, if you look, I went back. I just want to see how people were reacting the night of the election. Mm-hmm. And one interesting thing is all of the videos of that night, with the newscasters going, "Holy crap," are from Trump supporters. With this really kind of
stunned,
but really mean spirited, like look at the little crybaby, super mean spirited stuff. It was just kind of like, I don't know, kind of a fascinating thing to like go back and see. But one of the videos they had was like from 9 months earlier, where it was a bunch of respected journalists on one of the news talk shows, and the one guy's like, maybe Donald Trump will be president. Everyone was like, like genuine laughter, like genuine, you don't mean that, like.
Absolutely,
and you watch
think that
it,
was
and you're
the
like,
opinion.
Woof. It wasn't like very unlikely. It was just like genuine howling laughter, and so we say that like, maybe not so funny.
No, everybody absolutely underestimated him, and I don't think it's just him. I mean, underestimated the machine that is behind him.
Yeah.
I can't remember the dude's name. That's like was Nixon's dirty tricks guy, who's still Trump's guy, which is amazing to me. Just like up from the muck again.
Yeah.
Unless he's listening, in which case, my tribute to you, sir.
Yeah, resume on the way.
But I people always underestimate that machine, and it's a big, strong machine that knows how to operate, knows how to spin anything. They get spin, and I think that's why Bill Clinton and James Carville and stuff were a good match to them, because they're pretty slick and they know how to spin things just as hard. Yeah. But on the other hand, I know people on Hillary Clinton's team, and they were pros, and they were doing a pretty good job. They actually, I think, generally ran a pretty good campaign in a very unorthodox time. Like, they did respond, they responded hard, but again, like you say, people just didn't care. They could have said anything, and that doesn't excuse, like, they should have obviously done it differently. It didn't work, so that, they should have come at it differently and maybe hit the economy more and, whatever that is. But you're right. When there's a percentage of people that will never believe a thing you say, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah.
Like, people just want, like, if people want a mean government that hates its own people, they can have that, and apparently people do want that.
Yeah.
Like, that is the request. Waiter, I would like the shit sandwich. I know what's in a shit sandwich, and I would like it, sir.
In fact, now I want two. You're making me hungry.
You are angering me. I will have all the shit sandwiches.
Yeah, exactly. In retrospect, I mean, maybe it was pick Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders as VP, as ridiculous it is, but just pick up all those other people who were like, needed an outlet for something. Because the right outlet to me just was not voting, right, making a point about something. Like, it just seemed like, man, do that vote for the crazy vaxxer next time, maybe. Like maybe not when Donald Trump's up.
I don't know. I mean, it's a great podcast. We're like, I don't know what we should do. Yeah, I know how to make a TV show, but I wish that there was a great answer. And obviously, the people in charge don't have a great answer now, too. There's a lot of soul searching, and I think they're going to have to be tougher. I think there probably are going to have to be a few bricks and bats. You know, I don't condone violence. You should not go out and burn buildings down. I don't think that in the end that benefits you. Usually, it's your own building that you burn down because it's closest. You know.
Right.
But there is definitely we're going to have to toughen up and figure out a way to push back in every legal means possible, and to be pretty tricky about it. You know, to be as clever as the word you use when talking about this, that to be as clever with the way that we push back.
Yeah.
And hope for the best. But also, I've always been sort of amazed through many years that we had a government, even with some of the Republicans that have been in. I've always been sort of amazed that we had as enlightened a government as we had. It didn't necessarily reflect the humanity that is the United States. And now this maybe matches. I mean, maybe this is a reflection of what our country is. And I'm not throwing that out there as like, oh, it's all redneck idiots and stuff. But this lack of tolerance, that does not mean I condone it or I'm in favor of it. But I always felt like I was many of my views were in the minority. And this sort of confirms it. It's like, you aren't most folks.
Right.
I've always been surprised when anything happens that I want to happen.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, look at that. Gay marriage happened. I thought you idiots would never go for it, but all right, cool. You know, and so I just take the victories as they come, and I guess probably I too took some of that for granted. Like, oh, we're going to keep on this march towards some form of goodness and equality, and there are valid arguments out there for less restriction on companies and less onerous taxes, and the Planet Money did a thing on like the half dozen things politicians will never do but probably would make the country better, and it was like getting rid of corporate tax and getting rid of like personal income tax and things that are not liberal issues, but it probably does they could show why from an economic standpoint that was probably smarter. I don't necessarily agree, but they make a good point.
Yeah, you would need a benevolent dictator, which
which doesn't work out well either. With this, those switch pretty quick.
I think one thing for sure that this election tells us is that the tide that was supposed to be happening that would lift Democrats to power forever, the immigration, the younger population, the population turning increasingly brown, Hispanic, etc. That's a little further away than we thought. That is not on our shoulders right now.
And there isn't there isn't a woman's block or a black block or a Latino block. That Latinos come from, there's tons of different countries, tons of different backgrounds. There's a lot of people who are conservative, Catholic, and it's same. You can't just say, oh, just because the demographics are changing, that means automatically the Democrats take power. It's like, no, you have to look at a lot of other factors, socioeconomic factors and educational factors and all sorts of things that are going to go into it. You can never take anything as a given. And as you see, where a lot of women voted for Trump. Well, people were shocked at that. How could they possibly do that?
A lot of Hispanics, too.
I personally agree. Yes, I think you're voting against your interests, but maybe it wasn't their interests that they were thinking about. They're just like, look, I am in dire straits, and maybe it is throw the Molotov cocktail into it all.
Yeah, my husband's sad. He's unemployed.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. And it is. I just want change. I don't care. It seems like this guy's going to make things different. I don't care what that different is because my situation is really, really bad. But again, that's again the sort of liberal assumption. Everyone who voted for Trump was poor and opioid addicted and all that stuff. No, there's a lot of like rich people. There's a lot of educated people. There's a lot of people, I know people who voted for Trump. I'm not one of those people that has only, my Facebook feed is just all one side. And I am surprised when I hear from some folks that I feel like should know better. Yeah. And they're pretty vehement in their opinion about Trump, pro-Trump. And it takes me by surprise, but I can't make the assumption like, oh, you poor person in a trailer. It's not, that's not the...
Because they still get a vote.
Yeah.
Like all your brains don't get you 2 votes.
Right,
They get you 1 vote.
Right.
And sometimes your brains get you voting for, John Oliver instead of someone who can beat Donald Trump.
And it's so much more complicated and obviously people kind of know it, but it's not the president. Like, why is that person in the trailer? Why is that person opioid addicted? there's a whole lot of there's a trail down there that goes to Congress, that goes to state government, that goes to education, that goes there's a lot of things led to that, putting a person in a position where they feel disempowered, that they feel that they have no future. In my view, many of those things on that trail were not caused by the Democrats, were not caused by liberal politics. In their view, they are. I'm going to assume mine's correct, but it doesn't matter. And maybe I'm not. Maybe I don't know the whole story. And I have people I respect and people in my extended family who most certainly have very different political views than mine. And I cannot just make the assumption that, well, you're a dummy. Sometimes you can. But yeah.
Oh man! So how do we bring this thing up and end it? We got to bring it up first.
Well, let's see. Funny celebrity stories or more George Washington trivia. People love George Washington trivia. Yes.
Get a lot of requests for
I guess the hope is, again, we'll circle back to history one last time, and say that the hope is that we have had terrible presidents. We have had idiot presidents throughout our history, and sometimes at very pivotal times. I mean, Andrew Johnson was a drunk idiot right after the Civil War. Now, he didn't have as many powers as current presidents do. That is worrisome. But Johnson and Andrew Jackson was pretty unstable and did some terrible things.
Right.
But the country kept going. So I guess you just invest in the idea that hopefully, we have a judicial system that hopefully is not completely rigged. Hopefully, we have a Congress that. Not just Democrats, but hopefully moderate Republicans have some common sense, maybe just at least in their own self-interest. You hope that you soldier on and you just go, all right, well, this was terrible. And unfortunately, I think people will suffer because I think there will be a lot of consequences because of this election. I don't think the people who think they're going to be helped are going to be helped in the ways they think they are. Maybe it's like the 80s, maybe now all gloves are off, companies go crazy, and the economy skyrockets for a while. Yeah. There's going to be a problem later, but maybe for a while it's the go-go, teens where we just we're making money hand over fist. I don't know, but we have been a pretty resilient nation throughout our time in dealing with idiots. We've had a lot of idiot presidents. This guy seems like he might be the most dangerous of them. Because there's so much power invested in him. Vested in him, I believe. Yeah, so please cut that. And invested. There's things invested in him. I hope that that's true. I am not someone who roots for the United States to do poorly for the next 4 years just so I can say ha, told you. Yeah. Hey, if he turns out to be this amazing business guy who somehow turns everything around and the world respects us in ways I could never have imagined, hey, more power to us. Then I will learn something. And much like your 0%, there's not a 0% chance of that. There is some chance.
All right.
I don't think it's a high percentage. I think it's lower than the possibility of him getting elected. But you don't know what the consequences are. Maybe the Democrats then retake Congress in 2 years, and that builds a strong base from which they can make improvements in their own party and not fall into traps like this again. You hope. You don't know what the consequences are, but yeah.
All right, that's good. That's positive.
Yes. Andrew Johnson's an idiot.
There you go. Hey, thanks for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
I appreciate
it. I'm glad to be on. I hope that I didn't just either repeat everything I've said before or my trivia didn't put your last listener to sleep, but it was always a good time.
People can fast forward if they want. All right. Thanks for listening. This has been the Something About Your podcast. I'm Kent Lindstrom. Talk to you next time.